Lekutei Sichos Chelek Tes Zayin Teruma Aleph. It's a Rashi Sikha. It's been a while since we learned the Rashi Sikha together. Of course, the Rashi Sikha is going to lead to a halachic discussion and to a hira, a lesson ba'avodas Hashem. So, the topic of the Sikha is the words V'yikchu li in the beginning of the parsha, Daber al bnei Yisrael, V'yikchu li Teruma, and Rashi says, Li lishmi. We're going to discuss what does it mean, lishmi. And of course we have to figure out what is bothering Rashi, and what is the chiddush of what is Rashi introducing to us, which we would not have known without his pirush. In Ascholas HaSedre is Rashi Maitik from Pasuk Diverte V'yikchu li Teruma und Mefarish li lishmi. Right in the beginning of the Sedre, Rashi quotes, it's the first Rashi in the Pasuk. As we know, that in the first year, the year Tashin Chafhei, 1964, 1965, the Rebbe would teach a Rashi Sikha each Shabbos, and usually it was the first Rashi in the Parsha, sometimes the first and last Rashi of the Parsha. This Sikha is from Shabbos Parshas Teruma Tashin Chafhei, 1965, and the Rashi being discussed is the first Rashi in the Parsha. Rashi says, what does it mean? Li, Yikchu li Teruma, li lishmi, for my sake, or literally for my name. So the question is, was is das schwer in die Wörter, was Rashi darf bechal mefarer sein? What is difficult in the pasuk? What is bothering Rashi? That Rashi has to come and explain that li means lishmi. And we're going to bring a number of suggestions, mostly from other mefarshei Rashi, and we're going to explain how those suggestions are not consistent with the Kloli Rashi, the rules of Rashi that the Rebbe taught us in how Rashi teaches and prepares us to understand the pasuk. So let's try one. The Pashto Taich from V'yikchu li is tsumir. Literally, V'yikchu li means take to me. Das heißt, zu geben das dem Ebersten, to give it to Hashem. Und das kann man doch nicht sagen, klappe dem Ebersten. But to say, take something to me, namely Hashem, doesn't fit. Warum Aleph? Wie ist Shaykh sagen, als man gibt ihm etwas, oder als darf zu dem ankommen? How can you give something to Hashem, or that Hashem needs something from you? She's doch Hashem aretzum loya. Hashem owns the entire world. Everything belongs to Him. Als balaim toch zu ihm und im erev lo. I won't tell you when I'm hungry. This is Hashem speaking. Ki li sevelim loya. The pasuk ends over there. Because I own the whole world, I don't have to ask you to feed me when I'm hungry. The Eibishter doesn't need anything from us. So we can't say, I'm giving this to Hashem. Give this to me. You give something to someone who needs something from you, who is lacking something. Hashem lacks nothing. Beis, der Wort li, the word li to me, weist, as die Sheiches von der Sach zu mir, is durch Kiche, lekarev, that the connection becomes stronger to this thing, to this item, this object that I want, because it was brought closer to me. Und das passt bloß b'negea zu adavar gashmi. So when you're talking about something physical, you could say, I'm bringing this closer to you. Hashem is not made up of physical matter. He has no body and no shape, no form. So how can you bring something to Hashem? Where are you bringing it to? To what? To what entity are you bringing it to say, li, to me? So in other words, the Eibishter doesn't need anything. You can't bring anything closer to Hashem than it already is. So to taich v'yikchu li literally, it doesn't make sense. And therefore Rashi wonders, what does that pasuk mean? V'yikchu li. Und der Riber darf Rashi mefarer sein as li meint lishmi. And therefore Rashi says li doesn't mean to me. Li means lishmi, for the sake of my name. For my name. So that's one suggestion. What Rashi is coming to tell us is answering the question: how does it fit the Yikchu li to me, to Hashem? And says it must mean not li but lishmi. Es ist aber schwer, also zu einlernen. but it's difficult to understand this, to learn this, is the meaning of the Rashi. Varum. Because, before we give the actual answer, we have in other words, a reason, we have another reason in the brackets. Neisif auf dem, was dem wollt ist nicht verstanden, was Rashi ist meitig vom Pasuk. In addition to the fact that, based on this answer, it would raise the question, why does Rashi quote both the words v'yikchu and Teruma from the Pasuk in his Dibur HaMaschil, v'bal die Schwerkeiten der Biur von Rashi is not inadvertently, since the question, the difficulty, and the answer of Rashi is on li. What does it mean, li? To me, if I don't need anything, and if I'm not around, if I'm not a physical thing. And the answer is li lismi. The Yikchu and Teruma play no role in this pshat. So then why does Rashi quote it? And if Rashi quotes Yikchu and Teruma, it means that they're part of this Rashi. So besides for that question not being answered, there is another issue with this explanation. Wenn gefinta zelche l'sheines mit denselben mechuven bescheiches zu dem Eibishten in the friedike psukim, we find the same term or similar term used with regards to the Eibishter in earlier psukim. For example, Aser Noloch, when Yaakov said that whatever you give me, I will give you 10%, I will tithe to you, Loch. Or in Parshas Boy, where the Eibishter says, Kadosh li kol b'cher, sanctify, make holy for me or to me every firstborn. V'kayoytze bazeh, and there are others. Und Rashi bewahren dort nicht, als das meint nicht kipsutei zu, oder zu lieb dem Eibishter. And Rashi doesn't say over there that it doesn't mean to Hashem or for Hashem, because it can't mean that, because Hashem already has what he needs, and Hashem is everywhere. From them is muchach, from the fact that Rashi doesn't touch upon this idea in those psukim is understood. We must conclude as nitos is by Rashi's firm to the mikra. Or the definite shelos and the Pirush. Now this doesn't bother Rashi, and Rashi has no need to negate it. Und das ist verstandige Pashtos. And the word li could be understood very basically. Well, then me is ma'aser or makdish azach for dem Eibishten, when we are tithing to Hashem or sanctifying, making something holy for Hashem. It doesn't mean that Hashem needs it from you. It just means that you're doing it for Hashem. It's not saying that Hashem needs it, and that He'd be incomplete without it. It's just saying is that you're making it holy for the sake of Hashem. I'm using the word for the sake, even though that's lishmi. But the idea here is that as far as Rashi is concerned, from the fact that he doesn't say anything by Aser and Ulach or by Kadosh Likol B'cher, it's obvious that Rashi isn't bothered by this question, how can you give something to Hashem? You're sanctifying it, you're making it holy, that's how you're giving it to Hashem. So we're back to square one. What is bothering Rashi? So before we get to another Pirush, we're going to try in Ois Beis to differentiate between Aser and Ulach and Kadosh Li, which Rashi says nothing, and V'yikchu li, where Rashi does say something, and to explain why they're a little bit different. As V'yikchu li is nicht gleich zum Lashon Aser and Ulach Kadosh Li v'kayetz b'zeh. That V'yikchu li is not similar, is not comparable to Aser and Ulach or Kadosh Li. Warum in der Yikchu steht nicht, dass man soll das Maktisch sein zum Ebersten V'chayetz. Nor nehmen. By the Yikchu, it doesn't say you should sanctify it, you should donate it, you should give it to Hashem and make it holy. It just says V'yikchu, you should take it. It doesn't say anything about the Eberster here. Und das passt nicht at the time of now. And here there's a problem. In Aser and Ulach or Kadosh Li, where the words themselves indicate that it's for Hashem, so then the loch or the li don't make a problem. But if it says v'yikchu, plain to take it, and it doesn't say donate it to Hashem or make it holy for Hashem, then the word v'yikchu with li becomes a problem. Der Rebbe muss Rashi sagen li lishmi, und damit wir recht verstanden können, was Rashi is meitig echt im Wort v'yikchu, and that's why Rashi has to say over here, has to explain the word li, because with v'yikchu, li doesn't make sense. without Kaddish Li or something like that. And that's why Rashi includes the word V'yikchu in the Dibur HaMaschil, because V'yikchu is explaining to us why he has to explain to us the Li. So maybe this is what's bothering Rashi. Why does it say Li? By Asra Asenelach and by Kaddish Li, we didn't have a problem because there was in a context of Meiser or of Kaddish Li. But over here, if we're playing the Yikhu, it needs an explanation of Li, Lishmi. Aber lefize, wollt gewen glatter, wenn Rashi is mefarish, as the Yikhu Li meint, they soll matte sein zu mir. If that is the problem, what's bothering Rashi, then Rashi shouldn't have said Lishmi, he should have said La'aktish Li. He should have said that the Yikhu Li over here means to be maktish it to me, to sanctify it, to dedicate it to Hashem. If that's what's bothering Rashi. Since Rashi doesn't say that the pshat of here is to be maktish it, to dedicate it to Hashem, clearly something else is bothering him, which is answered with the Lishmi. And therefore we're back to square one. What is bothering Rashi that leads him to Taich Li Lishmi? Other Mefarshim, mostly the Maskil David, also based on the Medrash Tanchuma, and the Medrash Yalkut Shemaini. So these other Mefarshim are learning as Rashi. Well, the Medrashim are not explaining Rashi. The Medrashim are the Medrashim. The muscular David uses those Medrashim to explain Rashi. The Rashi is Doshver, the Lashon V'yikhuli. The Rashi is bothered by the words V'yikhu. Take to me. So the Gedar saying V'yitnuli. Should have said, give it to me. It's a Teruma, it's a donation. And give me, or give to me, a donation. Dem zog Rashi li lishmi, and if Rashi says li lishmi on our main der mitzvah Ramazain, and Rashi is alluding to the idea as durch Teruma nehmt dem Eibishten, that with Teruma, through giving a Teruma, you can take Hashem, you can grasp, you can take Hashem with you, to you. Like the Medrash says on this pasuk, that the Eibishter, even though the Eibishter owns the entire world, nevertheless he wants his Shechina to dwell amongst the Yidden. And when it says V'yikhu li, oisi atem loikhim, you are able to take me, you are able to have me through the Teruma. But it can't mean that you're actually taking Hashem himself. The pasuk says that even the highest heavens cannot contain the Eibishter. Yechal Kalucha from the word Keli, it cannot contain the Eibishter because the Eibishter is bigger than Hashamayim Ushmei Hashamayim. And even the V'afki Abayis says that the pasuk ends that the Beis Hamikdash can't contain Hashem physically. So certainly a Yid can't take Hashem physically into his life. The Rebbe said Rashi li lishmi as shema yisbarach eschal aleim durch the Teruma b'nyan abayis. So Rashi says li lishmi, that it's the name of Hashem that dwells upon the Yidden through the Teruma and through building the Beis Hamikdash. Al derech v'shamu shmi b'nei Yisrael, like Hashem says to the Kohanim, I will place my name upon the Yidden. So Rashi is saying li lishmi, that through giving Teruma, you take Hashem, and even though you can't take Hashem, but you get the name of Hashem dwelling upon the Yidden. So according to this, what Rashi means by Li Lishmi is he's alluding to this concept, that Hashem's name is upon us. Not either a sufficient explanation to what's bothering Rashi, according to our understanding, our approach of Rashi, that Rashi is talking to the Ben Chamesh Mikra and speaks in clearly and concisely. Spoken many times that Rashi's explanation is written in a very clear style. Because even a 5-year-old who's learning Chumash can understand it. That this child should understand it from the words of Rashi alone, without having to look it up in the Mefarshei Rashi. So if Rashi meant this explanation, Rashi would have said it clearly. without hinting the word lishmi. He would have said, whatever words Rashi would have used, he would have used the words Eisiatem Leichim or V'shamor Shmiel B'nai Yisrael. Rashi wouldn't have just said one word, Li Lishmi, and for us would have to figure out that it means that the Eibishter is going to, that we can take the Eibishter through the Terumas HaMikdash and Binyan HaMikdash. So we're back to square one. Once again, what is bothering Rashi that leads him to give us the Pirush of Li Lishmi? So in Ois Daled we're going to talk about the word Teruma. First of all, as we mentioned earlier, we don't yet know, even according to the Pshat that we said, that the Yikchu is bothering Rashi, and if it says V'yikchu li, it still doesn't explain why it says Teruma in the Dibur HaMaskil. So we're going to focus on the word Teruma. And just before we go to Ois Daled, just to make it easier a little bit, I want to point out that the next Rashi, the second Rashi of this parsha, is the Dibur HaMaskil is the word Teruma, and Rashi Taitus Hafrasha, to separate. Yafrishu li mimamoinam nedava. They should separate for me from their money a donation. That's the next Rashi. Just so we understand what Teruma means. Teruma, we're going to see soon in the Sikha, Teruma often means to lift up. Teruma also here, Apipsutish Mikra, means Hafrasha, to separate money for the Eibishter. Okay. Viderman Frier is Rashi Domaitik from Pasuk Echten Vart Teruma. As we mentioned earlier, Rashi also quotes the word Teruma from the Pasuk. Und der Funes Muchach as der Hechrich li Pirush li Lishmi is nicht von die Wörter wie Kchuli allein. From this we learn that what compels Rashi to tie to li Lishmi here is not solely from the words v'yikhuli, not eich from the word Teruma, but also from the word Teruma. Ubahaktim. And now we're going to bring in a very interesting nekuda. As b'shas Rashi's hechrech a pirush is von sein pirush if später die converten pasuk. If what's compelling Rashi to learn in a certain way here is based on something that he's going to explain later on in the pasuk, is dann frier mefarish dem später die convert, far sein pirush if dem frier die convert. So what Rashi does is Rashi first explains the later thing, the later word, and then based on that explains the earlier word. Because the pirush, the second pirush, the pirush on the later word, is the foundation, is the basis for the pirush on the first word. So what Rashi will do, and we've had this in the past, I don't remember offhand, but we've had this in the past, that Rashi will explain something on the pasuk, and then he'll go back to the earlier on in the pasuk, because now that he explained this part of the pasuk in a certain way, now we can explain the beginning of the pasuk based on what he just said. So again, if Rashi needs a later pirush in the pasuk to explain an earlier word, then first he'll explain the later word and then he'll explain the earlier word, because the later word is the basis for the pirush on the earlier word. Ulefiza, according to this, v'bal das der hechrech af li lishmi is eich von dem Wort Teruma. Und Rashi is mefarish Teruma noch sein pirush af dem Wort li. Since Teruma is part of the Dibur HaMaskil, which means that Teruma is part of what's compelling Rashi to learn in this way, although the taich of the word Teruma comes later after he explains li, is there von mashma as der hechrech af li lishmi. Von der Wort Teruma is nicht verbunden mit Rashi's pirush of dem Wort. From this we can understand that the word Teruma, compelling li lishmi, is not dependent on how Rashi teaches Teruma hafrasha later in the pasuk, but rather, even without Rashi's pirush on Teruma, we still can use the word Teruma to teach me what does it mean v'yikchu li lishmi. Das heißt, wie wir sollen nur teachen dem Wort Teruma, which means to say, however we're going to teach Teruma, afilu nit vi pirush Rashi hafrasha, even if we're not going to teach Teruma according to Rashi, which Rashi said that it means hafrasha, to separate the money. But this machriach zan as li meant lishmi, it'll still force me to translate li that it means lishmi. In the next he's going to explain this. and oisei the beer in them. So let's go straight to the beer, so we understand a little bit better what the Sikha is trying to tell us. With Pashtus Landman, the Yikchu Lim is all this maktir sein to the neighbors. Literally speaking, basically to translate, the Yikchu Li bring it to me, take it to me, means we should sanctify it to Hashem. Das heißt, dass es wird hektisch. It becomes holy. Und das ist Rashi Shelu mit Meitig sein wie Yikchu Li Teruma. And this is what Rashi is coming to negate by saying wie Yikchu Li Teruma. The Yikchu Kipshutai meint, als Sach wird genommen von ein Ort in a zweiten Ort. Oder von einer Schuss in a zweiten Schuss. Yikchu means to take. To remove something from one domain to another domain. From one person's possession to another person's possession. That's what V'yikchu means. V'yikchu literally means to take something from place A to place B. Teruma can mentaichen up ipsudishal mikrev tzvei efanim. Teruma could be translated in two ways. Aleph v'Rashi taich. Number one, the way Rashi says it here in the pasuk hafrasha. Hafrasha literally means to separate. Es wird abgescheit von dem Reshus HaTerim, it becomes removed, separated from the possession of the donor, von dem Idens Balabatischkeit, from the Yid's domain of ownership, und durch der Hafrashe verhektisch, and by separating it for hektisch, it becomes connected, it now belongs to hektish. So literally Hafrasha means it's separated from the Yid and given to Hashem, to the Beis HaMikdash. Beis, the second Pirush, is Harama v'Hagba, lifting it up. Was be'eis hazal loshen wird genutzt, nit b'shayches zu agas mistiker Harama. When you're using the word Harama, lifting, not a physical, actual lifting. Not in Musik von Bailus, we're talking about in the context of ownership, or the like. Heißt es, dass die Sache ist gekommen in a hecher in Rishus zu Bailus. What it means, Harama upgraded to a higher domain, to a higher level of ownership. Like Rashi says, the field of Ephraim was lifted up, that it had an elevation, that it went from the hands of a civilian to the hands of a king. So, besides the fact that it moved from owner A to owner B, it also moved up. It was upgraded. It went from a regular person's ownership to the ownership of the king. Dann back to our case, the Yikchu Li Teruma. Die Sache ist früher gewesen in der Bailus von Aiden, und es ist gekommen in der Bailus von Hektish. It started out in the ownership of a regular Yid, and now it is in the ownership of Hektish, of the Beis HaMikdash, of the Yebishter. So, the Yikchu means to transfer ownership. Teruma means either to take it from one place to the other place, or to uplift it to a higher place. Alpiza is move on. So now we understand, as we cannot learn, as with the word V'yikchu Li, so now we can touch that Li, to me, means give it to Hektish. Warum die Shaykh is to Hektish, steht schon in die Werte V'yikchu Teruma. Because the fact that it has to go from the Yid and now belong to the Eibishter is already understood. And from the word Teruma, remember the beginning of Eis Daled, he said that Teruma is not dependent on how Rashi teaches Teruma. And here he explains, whether you teach Hafrasha, whether you teach Harama, separation, or elevation, in both there is an indication that the money is being taken from the ownership of the Yid and being given to the ownership of Hashem. So you can say that Li means give it to Hektish, that it has to be given away to Hektish, because I know that already, both from V'yikchu and from Teruma. Warum die Shaykhus zu Hektish steht schon in die Welt der V'yikchu Teruma, was meinen als das belangt ist zu Hektish, Teruma, sie gefindt sich in der Schuss von Hektish V'yikchu. Either that it belongs to Hektish, which is learned from the word Teruma, or that it's being taken into the Rishus of Hektish, which is learned from the word V'yikchu. And now in the brackets he's going to go into the Hafrasha and Harama. But before we get to that, let's just make sure we understand what we're saying here. So what's bothering Rashi is, what is the word Li telling me? If the whole point is that what I would have thought, the V'yikchu li means give it to the Eibishter, give it to Hektish, take it out of your domain, out of your possession, and give it to the Eibishter. I know that from the word V'yikchu and from the word Teruma. So Rashi is wondering, what's bothering Rashi is, what is the meaning of the word li? What is the purpose of the word li? Before we get to the answer, what Rashi is answering, let us first go to this next paragraph, which goes back to the Hafrasha and the Harama. When telling us that Teruma means the transfer of ownership, that for both V'yikchu and Teruma, we're transferring the ownership from the person to the Eibishter. So the way we understand that will be a little bit different how you touch Teruma, but the outcome will be the same. The chiluk is in them, the hesem to the tzvei pirushim in Teruma is nor. The only difference will be that how you touch the word Teruma, it will have the following relevance. If Teruma means, like the second explanation, to lift it up, dann steht der Indien auf das Welt in der Beilus von Hektisch, nur in der Wort Teruma. Und V'yikchu wird meinen, nur dem in verschiedene Rishus. Then Teruma, the fact that it's being uplifted, is telling me that it's going into the possession of Hektish, and V'yikchu just denotes the transfer of ownership, but not where it's going to. I stopped the line too early. Let's do it again. Dann steht der Indien als das Welt in der Beilus von Hektisch, nur in der Wort Teruma und V'yikchu. Teruma. Und V'yikchu wird meinen, nur das in verschiedene Rishus, als das gefindt sich in Rishus von Hektisch. Und der Pirus Teruma is Milash Nafrasha, and if Teruma means to separate, then will darf man sagen, as V'yikchu mit nicht nur dem Shinner Rishus, nor durch dem wird euch die Schleimus der Beiles von Hektish. Then you'd have to use V'yikchu to also talk about the ownership of Hektish. Again, if you say Teruma means Harama, to lift it up, figuratively speaking, because we're talking about ownership, then Teruma is talking about the fact that it's going into Hektish, and V'yikchu is talking about the transfer of ownership. If you say Teruma Miloshin Hafrasha, then you don't know where it's going to. So you'd have to rely on V'yikchu. Since there's a transfer of ownership, it has to go somewhere. It goes to Hektish. But either way, the result is the same. That both V'yikchu and Teruma together are telling me that there's a horizontal transfer. It's going from person A to person B. And there's also a vertical transfer. It's going from the person below to above to the Eibishter. And therefore, back to our original question, now Rashi is bothered. What's the word li coming to tell me? Und der Rebbe sagt Rashi, and now we're going to come to Rashi, and it's going to be a chidish davar. As li damit nicht as es wird im Eibishtens. Hektish. Li is not coming to tell me that it becomes the Hashem's. Al derech vi kadosh li, the kadosh li means give it to Hashem, sanctify it to Hashem. Versus anayed bazunder inyan li is teaching me a brand new concept. As es darf sein lishmi, das heißt as neser of the nesina to hektish. So sei noch an inyan. They're telling me that it has to be lishmi. Besides giving it to hektish, besides the donation, there has to be another idea. Kavona lishma, the intent. That the intent has to be l'shem hektish. Al derech vi kavona lishma ba get, just like by a get, it has to be l'shem this person, l'shem the husband, l'shem the wife, etc., etc. And let's say Torah, you have to write it l'shem kedusha sefer Torah. So too, as beim geben to hektish, when you're giving this donation, you have to have the intent, the kavana. You have to have in mind that you're giving it for the Eibishter. So now we understand what's bothering Rashi. Rashi is bothered by the extra word li, because everything else that you tried to tell me about this pasuk is understood from V'yikchu and from Teruma. And Rashi's answer, li lishmi, it doesn't just mean for the sake of my name, like we might have understood in the beginning, but it means lishma, that they have to give the donation l'shem the Eibishter. It's not enough to stam give it. And with this, we will get back to the Rashi, but with this we asked and answered. We now understand what's bothering Rashi. We now understand what Rashi is telling us with the words li lishmi, what his answer is, and the fact that Rashi is introducing a new idea that the Terumas Teruma of Machzas HaShekel has to be Lishmi, L'Shem, Ve'Eibishter. Adkan, for now at least, is the Rashi. We're now going to take the Rashi, this idea of Rashi of Lishmi, we're going to apply it to another area in Halacha. Based on this, we could say that there's something wondrous, something incredible that we could learn within Rashi that has an application in Halacha. As in the Minyan, based on this, what we're saying, that by these Terumos that were given in this parsha, Machzas HaShekel, and the Terumas HaMikdash, etc., Rashi is telling us that it has to be Lishmi. Gate Rashi Lishitasi v'Pirushi Alashas. Rashi follows this shita, this approach, also in his commentary on the Gemara. Shaitan Mishnah, there's a Mishnah in Masechta Tmura that says as follows: Echad Kotche Mizbeach, the Echad Kotche Bedek Habayis, Ein Mishanin Oison Mikdusha Likdusha. Something that was donated, a korban, an animal that was donated to the Mizbeach. Or something was donated for the upkeep, for the operational expenses of the Beis Hamikdash, you're not allowed to change it from Kedusha to Kedusha. For example, if a person donated an animal to be a korban oila, you can't make it a korban shlamim. This is kachi kachim, this is kachim kalim. The dinim are different, how long you can eat it is different, where you can eat it is different, and even to upgrade it, even to go from kachim kalim to kachi kachim, also you cannot do. So whether it's kachi mizbeach, karbanos that were given for the mizbeach, or whether it's kachi bedek habayis, which means things that were donated for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, either way you're not allowed to change from one intent to another intent. What that means we'll soon discuss. But basically that's the general halacha. He's doing the plukta. From the Rambam mit dem Ravid, there's an argument here between the Rambam and the Ravid. The Rambam learned as the din is eich b'negea zu bedek habayis gufa. The Rambam learns that this din applies also to something that was given for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. That im hiktish lebedek ha'heichel, that if it was donated for the upkeep of the heichel of the main sanctuary, le'yashan lebedek habayis, then it shouldn't be used for other parts of the bedek habayis, of the upkeep of the outer parts of the house or the actual building of the Beis Hamikdash. V'chein kol kayetze bazeh. And this is just an example, which means that if a person donated something for bedek habayis could mean the heichel, it could mean the mechitzis, the walls on the outside, it could mean so many different things. Well, if you gave it for one thing, it cannot be switched for something else. The Ravid aber kriegt for Rambam. The Ravid argues on the Rambam. And he holds in shinui ben kach heichel l'shar hazaros l'mizbeach. There's no difference within the bedek habayis, between that which was given for the heichel, or for the Azaz Yisrael, for the Azaz Nashim, or for the Mizbeach. Mizbeach over here meaning Bedek HaBayis. It doesn't matter what it was given for. Whatever it was given for, it could be changed around. So if you gave it for the upkeep of the Mizbeach, it could use the upkeep of the Eichel. For the Azaz Yisrael, it can go for the Azaz Nashim. That's what the Ravid holds. And as Mevaya, as the Din in Mishnah, not a Kachim Mizbeach. The Rambam said, the Ravid says that when the Mishnah says Ein Mishanin Eisam Mikdusha Likdusha, this is referring to the Kachim Mizbeach. As Kachim Mizbeach, Afilu Mikachim Kalun Lechamurim Ein Mishanim. That if something, an animal was donated for the Mizbeach, then you can't change even to go from a lower level of Kedusha to a higher level of Kedusha. And you can't change the duration for how long you're allowed to eat the carbon. And that's why you can't change within the Mizbeach. Says the Ravid. When it comes to the Mizbeach, or to the Bedek HaBayis, what's the difference in this and that? If we're going for the Heichel, if we're going for the Hazorah, what's the difference? So to go from Kachim Mizbeach to Bedek HaBayis, or from Bedek HaBayis to Mizbeach, I would imagine that you can't do. I didn't look it up enough now that I'm saying it. But within Kachei Mizbeach, everyone agrees, because that's what the Mishnah says, that you cannot change from one to the other. But in Kachei Bedek HaBayis, if something was donated for the upkeep of the Bedek HaBayis, of the Beis HaMikdash, then according to the Rambam, it has to state exactly what it was designated for. And according to the Ravid, it doesn't matter, you can move it around within Bedek HaBayis. What's Rashi's opinion? Rashi b'Perushay al Hashas is Mefarish Mishnah now. Rashi And Gemara explains the Mishnah as follows: the Kachi Bedekabayis Sheikdishim Lamizbeach Lei Asa Klum. If he gave Kachi Bedekabayis and it was something that was donated for the Bedekabayis, and now he switched it to the Mizbeach Lei Asa Klum, nothing happened. It doesn't change. Ubekachi Mizbeach, and within Kachi Mizbeach, so if you want to switch from Bedekabayis to Mizbeach, that can't do it. It's not effective. But Bekachi Mizbeach, within the Mizbeach, Ein Mishanim Miktushos Eil Ishlamim Mishlamim Leil. You can't change from the holiness of Oila to a Shlamim, or vice versa, which means from Kachi Kachim to Kachim Kalim, or vice versa. But he only says Bekachi Mizbeach. He doesn't mention any problem with switching within Kachi Bedekabayis. So again, to switch from Kachi Mizbeach to Kachi Bedekabayis or vice versa, that you can do. Everyone agrees. To switch within Kachi Mizbeach, to switch from a higher level to a lower level, or the opposite, everyone agrees that you can't do. The machlekes is, what about within Kachi Bedekabayis? The Rambam says that you can't change, it has to be exactly what you designated it for, and the Ravid says that you could change. Rashi seems to hold like the Ravid, because Rashi says Bekachi Mizbeach in Mishanin from one to the other. He doesn't say anything about Kachi Bedekabayis. So that implies that he holds like the Rambam, that you could, like the Ravid, that you could change within the Bedekabayis. Ma yesh ben zelazeh, what's the difference between this and that? So that's the Mishnah over there, the Gemara over there, with the various opinions. Let's bring it back to our discussion about Lishmi. We could say, Adas is eich verbunden mit dem Din anal. That this opinion of Rashi is connected with his din, as the Nisina das ein Lishmi, that the giving. And the word here, Nisina, is on purpose, not kicha, but Nisina, because we're going to get to that later. As the Nisina das ein Lishmi, that the giving of this donation has to be Lishmi for the Eibishter. And he explains, there's mechavan as gites lishmi fahren Eibishten. Since his intent is here that it's for Hashem, is the nit as a negea dinin proti avelchen eratos maktish given. It's not relevant so much what exactly he designated it for. Abiyas is lishmi, as long as it's for my name. As kumt on zum Eibishten, it arrives to Hashem. As long as it comes to Hashem, it's good. Und der Fahrer das macht es bei Bedeka Hechel. Wenn man das beschaffen sein zu Bedeka Mizbeach vakayet, if he designated it for the upkeep of the Hechel, it could be changed to the upkeep of the Mizbeach. Weil die Kavana Lishmi, Bedeka Mizbeach is not Kashi Mizbeach. Bedeka Mizbeach is the upkeep of the Mizbeach. Weil die Kavana Lishmi, it does not kein Lishmi prati von Hechel. It's not a specific for the sake of my specific need of the Hechel. No, the Kavana Kol is Lishmi from Bedeka Bayis. It's a general intent for the Eibishter, whatever the Eibishter needs in the upkeep of his house. It's almost as if to say, it doesn't say this, but this helped me understand it a little bit. Once you start choosing the details, I wanted to go to this, I wanted to go to this, that's you. You want this, you want that. That's your needs. The mitzvah of this teruma is lishmi, it's for the Eibishter. So whatever the Eibishter needs it for, based on the gizbar, the person in charge of Bedeka Bayis, if we need it for this, it goes for this. If we need it for that, it goes for that. Your job is to give it to the Eibishter. We'll take it from there. We'll go from there. If you start gribbling, it goes to this and not to that, all of a sudden, all of a sudden, it's not Lishmi the Eibishter, it's for what you want it to go to. It doesn't say this clearly in the Sikha, but this is how I help myself understand the connection between Lishmi and the fact that it's not Negeya what exactly it's going to, as long as it's being given to the Eibishter, it's being given to the Eibishter. So now we finish Eizvav, we took this concept of Lishmi, which is the Chiddush of this Rashi, and we applied it to a halacha that a person who donates a Teruma to the Bedeka Bayis, then it doesn't matter what he gave it to, it can always be used for any other aspects within the Bedeka Bayis. And the reason why that is because the main intent, the main goal here, the main purpose here is Lishmi, that it should go to the Eibishter. What exactly within the Heichel it goes to is not relevant to the person. Going back to this idea of Lishmi, we're going to have two questions. One on the idea of Lishmi and one on the pasuk. Now on this din you have to be Lishmi, we're going to ask a question. Is the Trumas HaMizbeach Liknes Ben Kavanas Tzibur. One of the Trumas is being spoken about in this pasuk. Rashi says later on there's three times a Truma over here. One is Trumas HaAdonim, one is Trumas HaMizbeach Bekala Gulgailas to buy Karbanis Tzibur, and one is Trumas HaMishkan. So one is for the Adonim, one is for the Karbanis Tzibur, and one was a general collection for the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Now when you talk about Karbanis Tzibur, Rashi Zogtaf and pasuk Amar B'Seinu Gimel Trumas HaMuris Kan. Now comes our question. So the Trumas HaMizbeach didn't just happen one time. It didn't just happen in Parshas Teruma, it would happen every year. Every year they would announce, in Chedesh Adar they would announce about the Machzas HaShekel, and every year they would have to give a Machzas HaShekel for the Karbanos HaMizbeach, and that's why we read Parshas Shkolim, either Shabbos Mevorchim, Adar, or in this case, this year Shabbos Chedesh Adar, because Chedesh Adar we announce about the Shkolim. Now the B'negei to Trumas HaMizbeach the din is as B'nemtes Bal Karchai. We take it against the will of the person. Mashkinin al Hashkolim, Mashkinin. In the translation that I looked up, we exact, we force it out of the person. In other words, someone who didn't pay his bill, you go and you collect it from them. You'll take something else from them, if necessary, to get them to give the shekel. And the sinner Bal Karchach is doch nicht mit sein Kavanah Bichlal. Upshite nicht mit der Kavanah Lishmi. If we're forcing him to give it, then he has no intent at all. He doesn't want to give it in the first place. Certainly he's not giving it Lishmi. So here's our question. How can you say on the one hand that you could force the person to give the half shekel, and at the same time you're telling me that it's Lishmi? Es bleibt noch schwer die Kasche zum Erforschen. Excuse me. Earlier we said in the name of one of the Mefarshim that the question that's bothering Rashi is why it says v'yikchu not v'yitnu. We never answered that question. According to Rashi, why doesn't it say v'yitnu li teruma? The teruma tells me that there's a transfer of ownership. Li tells me that it's lishma, and v'yitnu means that they should give it. So we're going to say that these two questions, they answer one another. They're din fun lishmi, b'negei to Trumas HaMizbeach al kolpanim. This din of lishmi, that there has to be given l'shem Hashem, even, at least with regards to the Trumas HaMizbeach for the Karbanis, is nit in their nesina. The lishmi is not important by the giving, as the Eid darf is geben l'shmi, that the donor, the Yid who's giving it, should give it l'shmi, nor in dem v'yikchu, in der lekiche von the Gizbarei HaHektesh, as they darf, and it's nemen von Iden l'shmi. The mitzvah, the mitzvah, or the idea of l'shmi is incumbent upon the treasurers. The treasurers who are collecting the half shekels, they have to do it l'shmi. The person who's giving it can give it Bal Karchai. Doesn't have to have any kavanah at all. But when it's being taken, when it's being collected, it has to be collected lishmi. The second time it says kolish, everybody. The first time it says daber b'nei Yisrael, it doesn't say everyone. So this is the explanation. Daber b'nei Yisrael, when it doesn't say everyone, geit avdiva, something genumen the trumas, the gizborim. But it says, talk to the Yidden, it's talking to the collectors, to the treasurers. When give, Aval Yidden was given, this is talking to every Yid has to give. Und der Fall ist nicht considered when die Nesine von the Yidden is Bal Karchach, and therefore there's no problem, there's no contradiction here between Lishmi and the fact that the Yid is giving it against his will, while der V'yikchu, die Lekiche von the Gizbarim is Lishmi, because the V'yikchu, the collection by the treasurers, is Lishmi. So, we now answer two more questions. We clarified the Lishmi. Till now we thought the Lishmi was that the Yid has to give it L'Shem Hashem. Now we're saying something else. Now we're saying that now we are saying that the Gizborim, the treasurers of the Hektish, have to collect it Lishmi. And that's why it says V'yitnu li Teruma. That's why it says V'yikchu li Teruma, because the Kicha, the collection, has to be Lishmi. Now we have to understand why. Why is it so important that the Gizborim should do it Lishmi? Why do the treasurers have to do Lishmi? Since the Teruma could be against the will of the giver, comes out that by this Teruma the intent is not relevant. Later in the pasuk it says, any person whose heart is generous. From this we learn that when you give to the mikdash, it has to be with the generosity of heart. So then the kavanah is negeya. But over here, you're giving it against your will. The kavanah is not negeya. She's blazed negeya says long common. So what's important is that it should arrive. It should reach hektish. Ein farvos darf men dem ein farvos darf men der by them lishmi from the gizbar was named the Teruma. So what's important that the treasurers who are collecting the donations should do lishmi. The pastor is going to suggest an answer which is going to ask on. You might want to say that this is similar to what Chazal tell us, that someone who is in charge, who has a leadership position on the community, should not unnecessarily throw a fear, frighten the olam, frighten the people. Since their job is to collect the donations from the Yidden even against their will, so it's very important that there should be no ulterior motive. So therefore we're saying that the collection should be lishmi. It shouldn't be that the person who's collecting it is collecting it because he needs the money, or he's collecting it because it's a covet for him. Because once you start doing that, since you're taking money from people, it becomes uncomfortable for the people. People stop to trust. So therefore, it could be that the pshat is that it should be lishmi, that it shouldn't be for your own covet or for your own whatever it is, for your own ulterior motive. It should be for Hashem. But this is not smooth. It doesn't really clap to say that this is the pshat. The fiza is that in from lishmi didn't get to the lakicha from the Teruma, nor to the gizbarim. Then it's not about the collection; it's about the people who are collecting. That it's about the people, that they shouldn't have ulterior motives. They should be honest. From pastas haloshen va'inyin is aram ashmas is negia in the lakicha from the Teruma azizal zayin li lishmi. The way it says of yikhuli, it's mashma that the actual collection should be lishmi. It's not about the people as much as it is about the actual taking it. So we're back to our question: why is it so important that the kicha should be lishmi? That the collection by the treasurers should be l'shem Hashem. In today's task, we're going to bring in two of our favorite topics. The topic that the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash, are an example of making the Olam Hazeh into a Direle Yizbarach B'Tachteinim, and the idea of Sur Meirah and Asay Tov, the two levels in serving Hashem. Oistas is the beer in them. In the sinus that Teruma is given for the Mishkan and the Kabbanis. If Machin in the Mishkan Adirele Yizbarach V'Al Yodi B'Chol Olam Kulei, the Teruma was being given for the Mishkan and for the Kabbanis to make a Mishkan a dwelling place for Hashem, and through that a dwelling place of the whole world for Hashem, for the whole world. In the Asiyah for Adira. Now, when making a dwelling place, these are Zainoi for Adira Smelach, fit for a king. There has to be two stages. First, the chamber has to be cleansed, has to be cleared out from any dirt or unnecessary things. And then you could decorate it and bring in the nice furniture. These two levels correspond to Shomer Asetev. The difference is, it's not just two stages in Avodah. There's a difference. The Avodah from Sur Meirah is not going away from the Ra, removing the filth. That's only a preparation for the making, preparing the dwelling place. The Asiyas Adira B'Poil, the Amshachas Alakus and Dvarim Gashmiyim, Zezon Veren Adira Vadamebishn, but to actually make the dwelling place for Hashem, to bring down godliness into the physical, material matter of this world, this happens through the actual actions of a Yid. This makes the Dira for Hashem. Sur Miraz, preparing the ground to make a Dira for Hashem. The action, the positive action, this is making a Dira for Hashem. And therefore, this difference, that one is a preparation and one is the actual deed, this actually has a practical application in how these Avedis are done. When it comes to Sur Meirata, removing the filth, here what's most important is the action. How he accomplishes by himself that he should not transgress Hashem's will, how he does it is not relevant. Even if what motivates him is his selfishness or his fear of consequences. Doesn't matter, as long as he's not doing what he shouldn't do, we're good. When it comes to the action of bringing Elokus into this world and making a Dira for Hashem, here it is important that it should be Lishma for the sake of Hashem. As well as Talmud, the Shleimus, the Karvana, for the Mebishn, he should do it with a complete intent for Hashem. Not for himself. Because this is how he's drawing down godliness into this world. And he's creating a dwelling place for Hashem. So therefore the deed has to be done properly. As so in order for the godliness to dwell within it. And therefore part of that is that there's no side, ulterior motives in this thing, because as soon as you bring in an ulterior motive, then it's not being done properly, and if it's not being done properly, then you don't have a proper Dira for Hashem. And this explains the Ma'amar Chazal, Le'elam Yasik Adam Teir Mitzvahs, Afal Pi Shalei Lishma, Shemitech Shalei Lishma Bal Lishma, that the reason why a person should engage in Torah mitzvahs, even though he's at a stage that he's still doing it Shalei Lishma. The Mishnah says, from Shalei Lishma leads to Lishma. It doesn't say, as long as it's getting done, it's done. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say as long as the act is getting done. It says because it's going to lead to Lishma. As the town versus Davs and the Reisik Afilush Lishma is Nital Echdi Avedi is Masbik Da Maisa or Iker. The reason why a person should engage or could engage in Shalei Lishma is not because this is sufficient, because at the end of the day, the action is the most important thing. No. The reason why we allow Shalei Lishma is because Shalei Lishma will lead to Lishma. Which that is the ultimate purpose of Dira B'Tachtenim. If you don't have the Lishma, you don't get to the goal. You don't have the palace that you need for the Eibishter. The Vasei Tov is lacking. So, now we understand another Nakuda. We understand that when it comes to building the Mishkan of Hashem, there has to be Sur Mirav Vasei Tov. Sur Mirav is not negaya how you do it or why you do it. As long as it's getting done, I say Tev is negay that it's been done lishma, because that's the perfect way of doing it, and that's how you make a Dira Leis Barach. Let's go back now to the Teruma. So this applies not just to the person's avodah of Sur Mirav Vasei Tev, but also when we are utilizing the aspects of creation, the whole world, to make a Dira for Hashem. As in the roof, that there too, both of these ideas exist. Aleph, there's Sur. There's a Sareis came from the Shus from Welt, going out of the domain of the world. Which is under the control of Klipas Nega, of the Klipas, of the forces of negativity. Which this is the idea of a person clearing out the filth. In this idea, when we're elevating worldly items to Kedusha, the first thing we have to do is we have to take it out from under the control of Klippa, and then we have to enter it in to the domain of Hashem, into the possession of Hashem. It becomes holy. And then it could be a dwelling place for Hashem. Which this is the parallel to Vasei Tev. So when we want to take something, a davar gashmi, a physical matter, and we want to elevate it to Hashem, number one, we have to take it away from Kalipa, and number two, we have to give it to Kedusha to Hashem. Uno pisa is move on. So now we understand. Even though we say that when it comes to the shkalim, the giving of the shekel is against the will of the giver, but in the media from the when you're taking it from the person, that's the surmeira, that's taking it out of its worldly ownership. The intent of the person. What's most important is, as is what's most important is the action. So even though that's the fact, that when we're taking it from the person, because we're taking it out of the ownership of the possession of Olam Hazeh, of the world, it doesn't matter how it's done or why it's done, it can even be done by karchai against his will. But when it comes to taking it by the treasurer, so that's the act that transfers it and enters it into the domain of holiness, into the possession of hektish. That has to be lishmi. That's the bipnimi sayanyanim. That is the deeper explanation of why it's negeya that the gizbarim, that the treasurer should take the truma lishmi, the yikhu li lishmi. It's because what they are doing is they are taking a davar gashmi, a physical object, and they are entering it into Hashem's ownership, unlike the way it was before, where it was not yet owned by holiness. And that act, the act of entering something into Hashem's possession, that has to be done lishmi, because that is how you make a dira le'yizbarach. Before we get to the Hira, we're going to go back to Harama and Hafrasha. That there were two Pirushim and Teruma, either Harama and Hafrasha. These two stages of the Nesina, the giving it by the Yid, and the collecting by the Gizbar, are hinted in the two Taichin of Harama and Hafrasha, lifting or separating. These two ideas. The the taking it from the world and giving it to the Eibishter are hinted, or explained rather, in these two Taichin of Teruma, lifting or separating. Hafrasha, was man gibt zu es wird abgeteilt voneinander Chelek, mit was das ist gewend me'urev. Hafrasha, which literally means to separate it from something that it was mixed into. Weist after Prisha von Yonichel, this shows the separation, the removal from its mundane possession. And so too it becomes separated from the person's reshus. But it doesn't tell us yet where it goes. But when you say it means to lift it up, main canal, this would mean, like we said before, das wird aufgeheben. It goes into the reshus of hektish. So now the Adam and Hafrasha, they fit in. There's both things. It's not two different pirushim. Both things happen. First, you have to do hafrasha. You have to separate that. You have to separate it from the person's possession, and then you have to lift it up and bring it to hektish. And here is something very interesting. Und das ist Rashi mit Rames mit Schreiben Lili Shmi noch meitig sein wie Yikhuli Teruma far sein Pirush Teruma hafrasha. And here, Rashi hints this to us by taiching Lili Shmi after saying the word Teruma, before taiching Hafrasha. Again, he mentions the word Teruma, but doesn't yet taich that Teruma means Hafrasha, separation. That's what he says Lili Shmi, right? That after Teruma, before Hafrasha. Move on, it's understood. As far as I'm Pirush Teruma Hafrasha, that before Rashi says that Teruma means separation, we're going to touch Teruma on its most simplistic, basic meaning, to lift it up. So now, but why? So Lishma comes after, so Lishmi basically comes after Harama, before Hafrasha. When it comes to the lifting, meaning to say the part that you're going, into Kedusha, that's where the Lishmi is Negeya. In the Knisa l'Rishus Hektish. Unita zayin the Inyan from Hafrasha from Rishus Hedyet. So even though Hafrasha is necessary, and Hafrasha actually comes before the Harama, but nevertheless, in the Taich of the Pasuk, it says V'yikhu. that the kicha of the gizbarim has to be lishmi, because this is teruma. This is when you're uplifting it to Hashem. So before he gets to the fact that there's a afrasha, there's an idea that's being separated, where you're taking it from the person, from the rishus of the olam. Before we get to that, when we're still talking about teruma as arama, that's where you need to have the yikchu and the li lishmi. Yud Beis is the Heira, and the Heira is a phenomenal idea that discusses being Mekad of another Yid. When you're being Mekad of another Yid, that you have to do it lishmi, for the L'Shem Hashem. The Heira from the Vedas Hashem. B'shas ha'id geht ba'virkin at zweiten Yidin. When you want to have an influence on another Yid, in Mekad of Zanta Teiro mitzvahs, you want to be Mekad of him. Geht Mekayim and the mitzvah of Nechech Techech Samisecha is going to fulfill the mitzvah of reproaching or teaching another Yid. Kenne bei sich trachten, bist du, wenn er sich wegen seinen eigenen Kimatir und Mitzvahs, ist wichtig, als einer will so sein Kind dabei lishma, because the person may think to themselves, well, I'm talking about my own Teiro Mitzvahs. It's important that it's really lishma. B'shas, es sich aber wegen einer Peil seiner Zweiten, but if I'm talking about influencing another person, is doch nicht bigger the Peil. What's most important is the action. As the end is lonely, but like in film. Sich abhalten von der Avera, okay, that the other person should start putting on film, that he should refrain from an Avera, etc. But the eighth and the Peil, das auf jenem ist lachinin das eine Gehe, but how you influence the other person seemingly is irrelevant. Ken sich in sein Techacha reimisch na hergisch hepich von Havas Yisrael. It's even possible that in his reproach, a feeling of the opposite of Havas Yisrael could get mixed in. Oder akopanim bedakas the hergish as is der mechiach. Or on a more refined level, that a person thinks to himself, I am the teacher here. Is shenef in Sveiten. He's better than the other person. And he acknowledges that the fact that he thinks he's better than the other person is a problematic in his Avodas Hashem. And his Nachnit came mevurer. He's not yet a totally transformed person. By him is noch da hergish von Yeshus, and he still feels some ego, some arrogance here. But my lack in Avodas Hashem, how does that affect the other person? Accept the truth from whoever has said it. In other words, don't judge the messenger. Especially if the other person is doing sur meirah, which sur meirah is not the gear of the kavana. So it doesn't matter what I'm thinking, or I say the person who is doing the kiruv is thinking. Even if it's coming from a place of yeshus or a place of whatever it is, as long as you would think, as long as he's getting the other person to become a better person, is good. Of them is the Eirah. Comes the Eirah here like this. As od der cheshbon is norfar and sveiten. This cheshbon, that when it comes to sur meirah, is not negeya the kavanah, the ikar is the bepoil. That's for the other person to figure out, to do in his own life. The other person should want to run away from the Ra regardless of what the situation is. This person who's trying to influence the other person is even if you're influencing the other person to run away from Ra, it still has to be done lishma. Is by and in Yichiyuv, there's Zayin Lishma. Even if you're influencing the other person to do Sur Meirah, to run away from bad, but for you, it's an Asay Tov. You, the influencer, for you, it's a positive mitzvah to influence the other person to do or to not do what they shouldn't do. And if it's an Asay Tov, it has to be Lishma. Which is a beautiful a twist. Even if we say sur meirah, kavanah is not negeya, but for you to influence someone, that's an asay tov on your part, and an asay tov has to be lishma. So when it comes to be mekad of another yid, you can't say that the means justify the end. Fakert, the means have to be lishma, and only then do you get to the proper end. Befrat noch, as when es fällt bei ihm der Reiner Lishma, es mischt sich herein in eigene Pnei, especially when you see sometimes that if the Lishma is lacking, if he's mixing in his own personal motives, demol fällt nicht nur in seiner Avoide, nur es fällt euch in der Peule, ki de Boyaf in Zweiten. Then it's not just a lack in his Avoide, it'll actually affect how he affects the other. The other person is going to see through you. He's going to see that you are not insincere, that you have other motives. So not only does the Asay Teiv have to be Lishma, because that's the Kavanah, also in order to properly influence someone, you have to be sincere and you have to be Lishma. Und der Riber is Al Yatalei Malat Tzibur Shleim V'Shem Shemayim, and that's what we mentioned before, that a partner, someone who's in charge of other people, should not unnecessarily throw fright onto the people. Even if you just want to them you want them to be careful. Because if you mix in a personal feeling, that's the opposite of L'Shem Shamayim, because of that, the goal will not be accomplished. But if he's doing it for the sake of Hashem, even when it's against the will of the person, it's involved with something that's forceful, like like you say, you can force someone to give tzedakah, is nevertheless those who get other people to give tzedakah, their reward is even greater than the one who gives. The treasurers, the collectors and the distributors of tzedakah, it says that they are bringing righteousness to the people like stars. Even this tzedakah, the tzedakah that's being forced, it's also great because it hastens the geula. So when you do your Aveda Lishma, your schar is bigger and it brings the geula. But if it's not Lishma, not only does it not fulfill the kavanah of Dira B'Tachteinim, it doesn't either fulfill the kavanah of what you're trying to do to influence the other person. And therefore the hira is when you want to influence another person, it has to be Lishma, it has to be L'Shem Hashem, it has to be sincere, and it cannot have any personal motives involved, because otherwise it cannot ultimately accomplish what it has to accomplish.